If we fail to act now, our country could find itself in a circumstance in which we have to take draconian action at the worst possible time in the midst of a crisis. I pray to God that we have the wisdom to act before that point.
A dire warning from Senator Kent Conrad on the deficit, but really, will prayers work at this point?
Yeah, they might need more than that. Top Line begins right now.
Welcome to ABC News Top Line. I'm Karen Travers in Washington.
And I'm Jonathan Karl.
And every day at 12 o'clock, we bring you the latest, greatest analysis, politics, news, everything you want to sit down at lunch and get all of your news. So, John, kick us off. Taxmen,
that's where I'm starting. Today, we finally have a meeting, the beginning of the process. Treasurer of the Secretary, Timothy Geithner, is meeting with the bipartisan congressional group to try to come to some agreement about extending the Bush tax cuts, about dealing with the unemployment insurance expiration, about funding the government. It's amazing that we've gotten to this point. Unemployment insurance expired, as you know, last night. The government funding runs out on Friday. The tax cuts, the Bush tax cuts expire at the end of the month, and finally they're getting to work. Obviously, signs of a compromise in the air, but it's taken a while.
It seems that's where it's inevitably heading at this point. White House Press Secretary Robert Gibbs said today that, indicating that the president's line in the sand is permanently extending the tax cuts on the wealthy. So perhaps there is some wiggle room about extending them for everybody on a temporary basis. The permanent ones they want for the middle class. There's a lot of wiggle room, I think, in there over the next 30 days.
He will not allow permanent extension for the rich, and the Republicans will not allow an increase for anybody, at least in the short term. So there's an obvious compromise.
Somebody's going to have to come in. Priorities, priorities. Yesterday, I thought it was a fascinating exchange at the White House briefing. Jake Tapper went through a list of things to Press Secretary Robert Gibbs of everything the White House wants to accomplish, starting with funding the government, passing unemployment insurance extensions, don't ask, don't tell, the DREAM Act, tax cuts, and START. Asked if it could all be done, Robert Gibbs said yes, absolutely.
All in the next 18 days, no problem.
Scott Brown, however, a Republican from Massachusetts, is not really happy with what the Senate is considering, given that very large to-do list.
To work on food safety. Oh my gosh, it's so important. I'm glad I rushed back from our break to work on food safety.
Yes, priorities.
But here's the thing. He raises a really good point here, which is, since the election, there has been only one topic that has been under discussion on the floor of the Senate, only one issue before the Senate, and that has been the food safety bill. Absolutely remarkable. We've gotten to this point. They haven't even touched all this talk about the sky will fall if we don't deal with the START ratification has not come to the floor of the Senate. Tax cuts have not come to the floor of the Senate. The budget has not come to the floor of the Senate, but we've talked about food safety plenty of times.
It feels like it's that last couple weeks of a semester and a college kid is trying to cram everything they possibly can before they head home for Christmas.
But wants to spend all his time on something else before he actually gets to it. All right, now here's the next one, signs of the times. Gotta tout this one. We here at ABC News did a story on just a wonderful new regulation from the federal government that was requiring every town and city in America to change their street signs because the ones that we've all been using all the years apparently aren't visible enough. So they were told you have to get new reflective material, the fonts have to be in mixed case, not all caps, and of course the towns and cities have to bear this cost themselves. Well, we did this story, got a lot of outraged small town mayors and the like to talk to us about why they don't want to do this. And guess what we heard from late last night? Transportation Secretary Ray LaHood said this doesn't make any sense at all. His own agency's regulations they are now going to revisit and we imagine change.
You've crafted a nice little beat on signs, because I do remember that Recovery Act sign piece that you did a couple months ago that got a lot of traction as well. How much it costs to build those signs saying the money for this road project is brought to you by the Recovery Act.
Right. The one, my favorite was the $10,000 sign out at Dulles Airport. Yes.
And finally, trash talk. This is fantastic. Last night, Charles Barkley was on Conan O'Brien's show, and he was talking about the president's basketball skills. He, of course, had that split lip this week, and Charles Barkley said the president is a one-handed basketball player, and he made a little prediction about what would happen if they played a game of one-on-one.
Confident you would do well in a game, in a one-on-one against the President of the United States.
Oh, yeah. I'm an old fat guy now, but I'll kick his ass.
No, but is Barkley Republican, right?
He is. He was going to run in Alabama, I believe,
senator, governor, whatever he was going to do. Yeah, okay.
Does that raise Secret Service warnings when somebody threatens to
I don't think that we're going to see that. And if I were the president, I wouldn't be challenging former NBA stars, no matter how fat and old they may or may not be. Anyway, we have got one of our favorites here in the studio with us, Mark McKinnon, Republican strategist, one of the real good guys in this business, Daily Beast columnist as well. Mark, I gotta ask you. You had a column that really caught my attention this week, looking at the similarities between candidate George W. Bush and candidate Barack Obama. I mean, I was with you throughout that entire 2000 campaign, following the 2008 campaign. There was one issue that they were exactly alike on.
Yeah, I was really struck as I was watching President Obama campaign early on in the campaign, listening to his speeches about changing the tone in Washington. I thought, you know, that's exactly.
Where did I hear that?
I've heard that before, and it's exactly the same sort of thing that then Governor Bush was talking about during his campaign, and it's remarkable the extent to which they were really committed. I think both of them. I think genuinely to trying to come here and establish a more collegial dialogue, more bipartisanship, and both of them hit the wall big time. And we've got this atmosphere of hyper-partisanship that's just getting worse and worse by the day.
I mean, you got to say this is the one issue where the both of them have absolutely failed completely.
Yeah, they really have, and I think you can chart it and look at it for a host of different reasons. To some degree, I think President Bush got poisoned from the get-go because of the recount. There were a lot of Democrats that didn't even see him as a legitimate president. Maybe you can say the same thing about a lot of Republicans and President Obama and the birthers and what have you. But it makes governing very difficult at a time when we've got, you know, arguably some of the greatest challenges we've ever faced. When people must be compelled to work together, they get punished for doing that. And they get rewarded for being bipartisan, for throwing bombs. And so it's really frustrating. And you know, I think people in Washington sort of say, well, that's just the way it is. But you get outside of Washington and talk to Americans, they are so appalled by what they see going on up here when we've got so many things that are so important.
What lessons can this White House take then from, if it didn't work for Bush, similar hyper-partisan environment, but what lessons could they take to perhaps change things?
I think that the meeting yesterday was a great first move, and I think that, you know, the only surprise should have been that they were having the meeting. I mean, it shouldn't be a great surprise that perhaps not a great deal was accomplished yesterday, but if we could have this regularly, then people would sort of get out of the theater of it and begin to understand each other, because when you don't even see each other, don't sit across from the table from each other, which, by the way, nobody in Congress or the Senate does anymore. They don't even have, they used to have like a caucus lunch where the Republicans and Democrats would meet each other once a week or whatever. They never even see each other. So it's a lot harder to, you know, when you know each other and work with each other across the aisle and talk to each other, it's easier when you do that to legitimately sit down and work these problems out.
What do you think Obama's gone wrong on this? I mean, what would have been the big missteps?
Well, I'm probably a demographic cell of one that has great sympathy for both President Obama and President Bush. You know, it's
that's a pretty nice crosstab. Yeah,
not a lot of us there, but I just think it is it just seems like it's an impossible job anymore for anybody, for one man or one woman, given the challenges that we face, dealing with the evolution of technology, the proliferation of new media. I mean, it is a fire hose every second, and this hyper-partisanship just amplifies the poison and makes it that much more difficult to address these significant problems. So I think, despite what the professional left may be saying, or the professional right, that it would really serve President Obama's long-term interests in the country if he takes this sort of meeting yesterday seriously, does more of it, and because I think if he sat down with Cantor and Paul Ryan and they had a list of 100 things, and Boehner, and you know, I bet there's 30 things on there the president could say, you know, let's do these things, let's move ahead, and God, the country would be so supportive.
Hyperpartisan seems to be the buzzword these days, and you are part of a group, No Labels, that is trying to cut through this and bring civility to politics. But you also insist that this is not necessarily the pathway to a third party. Why not? What if that is the option that maybe people want right now? They're just fed up with both sides.
Well, people want a voice and they want a choice, and they don't feel like they've got any of that right now. They don't feel like anybody's representing them. They look at Washington, they see the hyperpartisanship, they see the you know, the far right and the far left and grabbing the microphones and dominating the debate, and they just don't feel like they're being represented, and it's true, they're not. And these are millions and millions of Americans who are concerned about where we're going and legitimately feel like there's nobody representing them, and in fact, you know, when people do the right thing up here and reach out across the aisle, try and work together, they get punished. So what we're trying to do with No Labels is launch this in December, on December 13th. We've got 1,000 citizens from across the country who are going to be there and help launch this effort. But beyond the 1,000 that are coming from across the country representing all 50 states and who are going to be monitoring their districts back home and the behavior of their elected officials over the next couple of years, we know that there are millions and millions and millions of Americans who don't feel like the middle is being represented. There's no voice out there, and that's what No Labels is going to do.
So we're almost out of time, but I do want to ask you about, I don't know if you saw Joe Scarborough's column yesterday, just eviscerating Sarah Palin. but more than that, taking on the Republican, you know, the other potential candidates, Republican leadership, he says are afraid to take on Sarah Palin. What's your take on this?
God bless Joe. I love him, and you know, he's a truth teller, and he says things that people don't like to hear. And you know, the fact is that Sarah Palin is an incredibly complex and fascinating figure and problematic for the Republicans. I mean, she's both an asset and a liability. And Scarborough's
how potentially damaging is she to the Republican Party?
Well, she energizes a lot of people, and we've got to take that seriously. But she's become like the political equivalent of a Mafia Godmother. You know, everybody's afraid that they feel like they need to go kiss her ring, and they're afraid to do anything without her blessing. But the fact is, she's highly polarizing. You know, for most of Middle America, they see her as a highly polarizing figure. She contributes to this problem of hyperpartisanship. You know, with her sort of very partisan attacks and conspiracy theories and. But she has energized a lot of conservatives and a lot of women in the Republican Party and other Republicans. So, but I tell you, I can assure you that she's driving the Republican establishment crazy, trying to figure out how to deal with it.
All right, we like the Godfather imagery. Thank you very much, Mark McKinnon, for joining us.
NoLabels.org.
NoLabels.org.